Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our February's Next Partner webinar with Forefront Coaching and Mike Lane Evans. My name is Lisa Friedlander. I am the CRO over here at Next, powered by Schulman Rogers. We are an award-winning platform for the delivery of legal services to startup and emerging growth companies, creating tons of value add for our clients and potential clients, and contributing to the startup ecosystem. These partner webinars are just one of many things we do on a regular basis to support startups and entrepreneurs. I am thrilled to be having Mike here from Forefront Coaching on a critical topic that we all need to understand of how to make investors and clients care about you, care about your product, care about investing in you, lots of different important things and angles that I know Mike is going to speak about. Mike is a communications coach. He's worked with over 1,000 startups and the most common problems that companies face in getting others to care. In this workshop, we will look at what we can do to get others to emotionally and financially invest. Mike started acting at age 8, and by age 28, he was ready for something else. He started offering his skills as a public speaking coach, working with thousands of individuals to improve their storytelling and increase their impact. Since then, Mike has trained as a personal, careers, and executive coach with the International Coaching Federation. And as a qualified coach, Mike founded Forefront Coaching, where he has built a team of coaches, designers, editors, content writers, marketing, and sales specialists. Together, they provide a holistic place for any business to identify communications issues, develop their personal skills, and thrive with their teams. So it is my honor, and with much gratitude, I will now kick this over to Mike. This is an informal session, everybody. Feel free to add questions to your chat, to the chat, raise your hand, chime in. Mike is graciously agreed to have this be as interactive as possible. So we hope everybody gets as much out of this today as we know that you can. Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm in London, in the UK. As Lisa says, I trained as an actor. I worked as an actor for a lot of my sort of adult life. And I found myself in a situation in 2016 where I was going into every meeting that I was having, and I was giving what I called at the time 60% of myself. I found myself in these situations where I would do loads of practice. I would be really prepped. I would have researched, and I would know the people that I was meeting with. And I would come out the room and I would think, I don't know what happened. There was a barrier there. There was a wall in place, and I only gave 60% of myself. Well, at the time, I was doing a load of communications training with the British military. And what we did during that time is I started to build strategies and models and ways of improving my communication in those moments, my ability to connect with the people that I was meeting with. And a lot of that built the foundation for Forefront Coaching. So as Lisa says, I'm a trained coach in a number of different areas, and all of Forefront Coaching is about communication. If you see me leaning in every now and then, I'm just going to be, it's Lisa. Feel free to use the chat function. If everyone has any questions throughout, and if you don't feel comfortable jumping onto the mic, feel free to use the chat, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. So with Forefront Coaching, we focus on a number of different communication areas. And having worked with over 1,000 startups, it just keeps coming up again and again and again. People have this amazing product, this amazing service, and they're just not able to get investors to care about it. They're not able to get customers to be able to actually connect with why now or why us. And I see a lot of pitches that try to put it in a very formal or formulaic way of a why now slide or a why us slide, and taking us through these kind of steps. But it's not necessarily speaking to the human being that we're meeting with. And so to make it as interactive as possible, I wanted to ask you some questions, first of all. Focusing on investors before we start focusing on customers. Simple question. What do we want from investors?
Money.
Yeah. Thanks for getting that out of the way. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Mark. Let's not beat around the bush. We want money. What else do we want?
The most important thing, in my view, you either get money or get a strategic. I would be way more interested in somebody that brings something way besides money, customers, contacts, partnerships. Because money's money, right? You want someone that brings both.
I completely agree with you, Glenn. And as we'll go through in the workshop today, there are going to be some stories I'm sure that people can share of times where it's easy to forget anything below the money. To just be in that situation where like Mark said, it's up there first. Glenn, I completely agree with you. We want something else. For you, Glenn, what do you mean by strategic? Like, what is it that you would be looking for?
Yeah, listen, we're a fintech and we haven't raised any external money. We're grinding it out on, hitting certain milestones before we do any of that. But the concept of a strategic investor is money plus, and the plus for someone like us would be access to either customers, partnerships, revenue, distribution, all the things that we'd be interested in that we couldn't get on our own, that it would be a prerequisite that any investor have kind of in a Shark Tank, you do business with Cuban, you get Cuban and his network, same concept, right? It's got to be very strategic.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Glenn. Anybody else want to share what you're looking for from an investor? Okay.
This is Amy Meadows. I'm usually looking for connections and the grace and empathy of being able to take those next steps. The guidance.
Yeah. Okay. So the grace of the investor or their ability to provide you with a network with the access?
I mean, both, honestly. You can't survive without all of it out here.
I completely agree with you. So I'm just going to share my first slide with you all here. What we want when we're pitching to an investor, there's an opportunity, we haven't said this one, to share your passion, to build connections we just spoke about, and simply secure the next conversation. Because it's so easy to go into those interactions thinking, I need the money. And especially now, there's no checks being written on that first meeting. It's just simply the opportunity to secure that next conversation. And how we secure that next conversation is the main thing that we're going to look at over the next kind of 45 minutes, I guess. Not only just making sure that we tick the box and that conversation is there, but also understanding what it is that the investor wants. And this also, the reason I pause there is because there is a bit of a focus already here on investors. But even if we talk about potential customers, the same things are true. If we're going to get them to not just buy the product and service today, for the next month, for the next kind of 3 months, depending on how your sales cycle works, but actually what we're looking for is that get them to commit, to be involved, to be connected to the business, so they stay with you for that longer period of time. And so people are interested in who you are and not just what the business is or who the business is. And so that opportunity to get there in front of you is what that first bullet is all about. Just sharing your passion, because on the whole, customers and investors, they're looking for that. They're looking for who are you, especially at, kind of pre-seed and seed stage. And so the opportunity there to build connection, secure that next conversation. So how do we secure investment? Well, we need to build trust, that connection, and immediacy. So even just to get that next conversation, we need to understand and build that immediacy from them. And so a couple of the tools that I'm going to show you today, there's going to be a bit of a flyby on some of this stuff, but we're going to take a look at how do you start to build that immediacy, that why now stuff that we were talking about.
And Mike, before you head on to that, Mark
Yeah.
has a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on motivation on investment? Mark, maybe you can clarify your question a little bit.
I mean, of course, an investor says, well, I want to give you X amount of money because I know you're going to make me $1 million on my $1,000 investment, right? That's the first thought you may have. But as I'm going along, and I have investors in our company, but I think many, many times they would rather invest because they think it's a good idea they can help the world. It just may be entertainment or fun for them because they like the devices. It may be, they had a childhood experience involving a fire in their home by a stovetop. So that's why they're investing. But do you have any thoughts on that, on what is the true reason somebody will invest in your company? I mean, it's all the above, I'm sure, but is there a main one?
I mean, for starters, there's not even one sector or one type of investor. If you're looking at an impact investor, there a lot of the things that you said, like there's a personal connection to it. They're wanting to make that difference in the world and disrupt and bring some change to a group of people or a culture or a country, because they really feel that there's a need for it, and that's what drives them. And then, of course, we've got investors who are out there to make money. And so I'm not sidestepping your question, but in reality, to say, what does the investor want? It sees the investor as something other. And actually, one of the biggest things I want to say to you all throughout this is, investor or customer, we're peers. We're just talking to another human being. And so we can't summarize what every investor wants in the same way that we can't summarize what every lawyer wants. I'm just using
Yeah, I think, I'm going to chime in what Lisa said. It's like, I call it beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So Mark, if you go to a fund, that fund's going to have a mandate. The mandate is X, technology or healthcare, whatever. But a high net worth individual, there may be, like in our business, man, something that's deeply rooted in a family's history is enough of a thesis for them to say, you know what, I'm supporting this dude because of he wants to change the world. So I think it's very centric to who you're talking to at that moment, and what their wherewithal is, and what their flexibility is.
Just going to pick up on Nina's question. Thank you, Glenn. When you're talking to an investor or an investor team, do you look for cues to see if what they're saying is resonating and pivot or not? Yes, I do look for cues, and I'm actually going to show you a model before the end of this around active listening. It's comes from negotiation tactics. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. But just to say at that point, what I would encourage you all to do is develop a 3-minute pitch. So it doesn't mean there's not value in a 90-second or in a 5-minute or in a 10-minute. On the whole, 95% of the time, the first meeting with an investor is going to be 30 minutes, sometimes 45 if they're really nice and really lucky. 30 minutes, 5 minutes to say hello to each other at the beginning, 3 to 4 minutes to say goodbye to each other at the end. You add in a 3-4 minute pitch, all right, we're at 10-12 minutes of a 30-minute call, and you have to get time in there for Q&A. And not just their questions, but you got to go in there with some questions. And again, I'm going to cover this with one of the slides a little bit later in the session. You've got to go in there with some questions that you need answered, because to go back to what Glenn was saying at the beginning, a couple of minutes ago, we want that advice from them. We want that relationship with them. You're building this relationship with them for the next 3, 4, 5, maybe longer years. So you've got to look for, like, who is it that you want investing in your business? Especially if I was about to ask for a show of hands, and I'm not going to do it. You'll know internally, but if this business is particularly connected, that your business is particularly connected to something from your childhood or from your life that has really compelled you to do something because you're emotionally connected to it, even more of a reason to be working with people that you get on with, that you can connect with. And so when I talk about trust, and to kind of go to the next slide here, we're going to look at a trust equation. Can I get a show of hands here? Emoji hands or real hands? Has anyone heard of the trust equation before? Okay. So I'm laughing because when I first discovered this is a psychological study. You can go Google it. You can do the equation if you like. I found it's so ridiculous. I was like, why is there an equation for how to build trust with somebody? Why do we need to make it mathematical? So what I'm about to do with you is I'm going to take you through this trust equation. I'm going to say, I don't personally care about the actual equation part, about the numbers, but you can go do it. If you're mathematically minded, or if you're an engineer and you want to do it, you can go Google it, and it's out there. It's by a guy called David Mayer or David Meyer, depending on how you pronounce the surname, from where you are in the world. I'm going to show you, and it's about the 4 key metrics in this. Trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So I'll take questions and challenges on this in about 1 minute. I'll just talk you through what we mean by all of these things. As I say, don't worry too much about the equation, but this is something that's been proven through a load of study. So in order to gain somebody's trust, we've got to be credible. We've got to be reliable. Depending on your culture, your background, your race, your sex, different things in this equation will seem easier than others. So I made a mistake when I first started teaching this years ago, that credibility is easy to get. You just got to do what you said that you were going to do. You got to prove out that your product is needed, your service is needed, and you will be credible. And then I've had people from different cultures, different sexes saying to me, listen, you're a white British guy. Like, it's a bit easier for you. Now, even that comment is different depending on where we are standing in the world and who we're speaking with. But all of this is to say that if anybody's looking at this going, well, yeah, duh, just be aware that it's not always that easy for everybody. But credibility, right? You prove it out, you create the product or the service that works, you build traction. We want to show that. This is just in the business sense. I can relate this to the personal sense if we end up with loads of time left at the end of the session. Reliability, you said you were going to send those numbers, so you did. An investor asked you to come back when you got 30K in MRR, so you did, and you hit that and you came back at that point. Those two, while they're harder for some people to come by and easier for some people to come by, they're usually the things that businesses, in my experience, about 90% of businesses, they get those two. They understand, yeah, sure, I need those. But lots of people forget these other two parts. So I'm going to talk you through these now. So intimacy, what we mean by that is vulnerability and authenticity. So I don't mean walk in to meet an investor and give them a big hug. Obviously, it's not that level of intimacy. It's about being yourself, being natural to who you are, because it's really easy, like Mark said, we want the money. So it's really easy to be pushed and pulled and swayed and changed by that fact. We need it to grow. Glenn, I see your hand.
Yeah, Mike, just one. Is this the same formula for customer facing activities too?
This is a formula for life. It's actually not a
okay.
business.
You know, where were you 30 years ago, man? No, seriously.
Yeah, they need to send me into preschools, right? It's like this has been around for a few years now, and it's I'm fascinated by it because I'm testing this daily. So I'm working with somewhere between 6 and 12 startups a day, usually at 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm sort of live testing this all of the time and how this works and how this does it. And so yeah, if you are introduced to somebody at a party and it's nothing to do with business, these same things are true. You're introduced to an investor or a customer. When I first met Lisa, I can talk about my business, I can show credibility, I can then reply to her emails, I can do the webinar I said I was going to do. Those are the credibility and reliability. But on this call already, I've shared with you my personal story, some of my struggles, some of the mistakes that I made. I'm not trying to show off or be fake. That's just me being intimate with you. That I'm a communications expert, and I like to do the air quotes, because is anybody ever really an expert in anything? But I'm a communications expert. and I make mistakes on all the stuff that I'm going to show you throughout this time. And the divide by self-orientation, it's not self-awareness, it's that phrase, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I find this one really useful for when you meet
That's fine.
when you're meeting investors, because it's really easy to spend 2 years, 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears getting ready, getting to that point. Like Glenn was telling us earlier, haven't actually brought in any external investment yet, but all that effort has gone into it. And we get to that point where we are in front of the investor and we can hit them with that moment of 3 years in. But they're not 3 years in, they're on day 1, minute 1. And plus, they had a certain amount, they got 80% committed already for their yearly spend. And they might love what you do, but they just can't actually meet the 100K that you're asking for example. It doesn't mean they hate you. It doesn't mean there's not an opportunity to come back to it your next round. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be building this relationship. And again, for some of you, that'll be a really obvious thing that I'm saying. But we've got to divide it by self-orientation, because if you have a good self-orientation score, you're able to consider other people's needs. It will help this overall scoring. So I'll leave that with you. I'm going to send the deck through Lisa. So anybody who wants to go and find this equation, you can do. So once we've got trust, once we start to build, my thing has stopped moving for some reason. Okay, good. So in order to try and build trust, we've got to start to try and understand the people that we're speaking with, because we can't just put this out. We can be credible, we can be reliable, we can be intimate. But if they're not being intimate, if they're got their video off, if they're sending another email in the background, we don't have to assume that they're bored or freak out that they're not engaged, but just try and understand where they're at coming into it. And so the next thing I'm going to show you here is a communications model where we can start to learn about how people like to be communicated with. Now, I'll talk you through the different ways that you can use it, and to Glenn's question earlier, how it can be in life as well as business. But first of all, just read, I'm going to go around the circle here. So people focused, high contact, high energy, low contact, task focused, and calm. Now, I often get this question, so apologies if this is obvious to you, but contact means touch points. So someone who's, if your communication style is high contact, you like to talk multiple times in the day, multiple times in the week. So low contact being the opposite of that. So do me a favor, just everyone take a look at the screen now and figure out what color you are with regards to your business, because we could do this about 5 times around. So with your business, internally with your team, or if you're a one-person operation within your relationships with your customers, what color would you say that you are? So if you're high contact and high energy, then you would be red. Okay. Some people are 2. I'm sort of 2. But if I'm honest, it's just because I'm not answering this correctly. So with the specific things in mind. So I'll take you through a little bit more detail here. If you're people focused and calm, a lot of those people will be friendly at their core, not just demonstrating friendliness, but friendliness is a really important thing to them, as is being informal and caring. In the red, it's about that frequency and that high energy. So it's not just that this is a person that has high energy, but that contact. You see a lot of extroverts who fit into this. So if people don't know the dictionary definition of an extrovert, it's somebody that gets energy from other people, from being around other people. So a lot of extroverts you'll find fall into this red. Now, it's not an accident that these 2 were at the top, because culturally, in the US, in the UK, in a lot of Western countries, with businesses favors the extroverts who fall into these 2 categories. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in my work is level that playing field. because the bottom two here are really super important. Green, people who like infrequent contact and often less video. These are the people that just want to kind of have a couple of touch points and be left to go and do their work. A lot of developers fall into this category, IT developers. And in the blue, we've got people who like check-ins and setting challenges. So these are the people who love a Monday morning stand-up, 30 minutes, set all the challenges, go away for the week, come back on Friday afternoon and check in with how everything's gone. Lots of people fall into that. So if I'm really, really honest with you, with one of my team members, I'm blue. Because there are so many firing things that happen in the week. I haven't got time for the same level of like frequency and high energy that I thought I had. But for me, I'm yellow. If I send any of you an email, if any of us stay in touch, my emails will, hopefully, I'll live up to this, will always ask you how you are at the beginning, how was your weekend, how's business been going, and it's not there for fake reasons, it's there because I genuinely care. So anyway, all of this is to say that we can either ask our internal team about this. So this is what I've done with my team, so I understand their communication styles. So I don't just have, it's my business, but I can't just communicate only in my way if it's not working for everybody else. So I've now got different communication strategies across the team. Externally, you can pick this up when you get better at it. You can pick this up from emails. Nick, I'll come to you in one moment. So we're getting back to how do we get people to care? That's the topic of this webinar, right? Whether you're naturally yellow or not, if we start to pick up on how people respond and we can start to respect the way that they communicate and communicate more in their style, you will get a lot more buy-in and connection straight away. So for instance, if my, hey, how are you, Lisa? How was your weekend? Is ignored 3, 4, 5 emails in a month, in a row, sorry, and we've been emailing for 6 months, Lisa's never asked that question, she's never answered that question, I got to start realizing I don't need to ask that question. In fact, and this isn't the case with you, Lisa, sorry, just using you as an example, if Lisa's just one-liners, no punctuation, just always straight to the point, that's her style. So I've got to respect that style. Now, when I get into pitching and meeting with an investor, if that's their style and I've picked up on that, then when I'm answering their questions, keep them short. As you probably picked up by now, I like to talk, I'm a good talker, but if someone asks me a question and I know they're a short person, I've got to keep those answers short, I've got to keep it real back and forward. Before I take the slide down, Nick, was your question about this?
Yes, thanks. You answered it in part. What lends itself, if we, in the format of a pitch, you're mentioning about 5 minutes of informal Q&A, getting to know one another. Obviously, I think that's an opportunity to try to match their style and energy as you're leading into the pitch. But if you had to relate this back to the trust equation, what is the default that you should lead in? Because if I'm naturally introverted, I oftentimes try to push myself to say, I'm going to bring high energy to this meeting and push myself to a different quadrant. But what would you say is a good place to start when you haven't yet picked up on what is the type of, person you're speaking with?
I'm going to cover this in a bit more substance as we go through a couple more of the slides, because what I'm about to say is just going to sound like it's off a bumper sticker. Be yourself. And like I say, I'm going to prove this out to you a little bit more and give you more than that, Nick. But in reality, investor, customer, person in your personal life, you'll all go to bed a lot more tired at the end of the day if you are pretending. If you're not just doing the things that you need, and there's a ton of investors out there. There's a ton of customers out there, and you're never going to get them all. The example I like to give when we're looking at market opportunity is the computer industry, right? So we're looking at the total addressable market of the computer industry. I don't even know what it is, but let's call it $1 trillion. And then we're looking at the laptop industry, the notebook industry, let's call it $500 billion. You want, like, neither Microsoft or Apple or Google, so they're on the scene now, none of them get to take the whole share. There's always other people out there. And so I personally, now maybe I'm saying this from a potential point of luxury, but I don't think we have to pretend to be somebody else or alter our needs and be unnatural or not be ourselves just to kind of fit around them. Now, the other part to this is, as humans, we assume all the time. It's a natural instinct. It's a survival instinct. So we're constantly picking up on whether something's dangerous, whether something's bad, and we're making these assumptions. And in survival, that's an amazing thing. But if you're standing there in front of an investor and you really need, like Mark said, their money, we can't trust our assumptions in those moments because we've got too much emotion. And if we've got time, I can actually show you the science of this as well. Actually, let's do that right now. Let me just shoot my slides along. So you this is the amygdala hijack. I won't go too sciencey, so we'll fly through it. But if you look on the left-hand side, this is our higher cortex in our brain. This is what keeps us calm and keeps us relaxed. But you see where it says amygdala, where there's that little tiny blue bit? What that does is when the amygdala is activated, it blocks off our body's ability to connect with that higher reasoning and that calm and that relaxed state. And the things that block it off, that cause the amygdala to kick in, are the things on that list: anger, fear, excitement, love, hate, disgust, and frustration. So all those moments, and this might be a moment in business where you're pissed off, it might be a moment with your partner that's a sexual thing, it covers life. These moments are where that amygdala can kick in. And so what we need to do is consider how we can stick to what do we really want. There's an amazing book. There's about 5 authors. So I'm just going to pull it up in my window in the background. So Crucial Conversations is the name of the book. You know what? Just Google Crucial Conversations, because there's such a long list of authors, because they keep adding authors every time they do a republication. So no one's going to remember them if I say them all. Crucial Conversations, if you've not read it, it's an incredible book. And one of the things that they found from, I think, 20 years of research is that you need to ask yourself the question, what do I really want? Now, sometimes that's added to, so what do I really want long term? So, Mark, sorry, I keep gonna keep using you as an example, but in the moment, in an investor's office, what do we really want? Money. What do we really want long term?
But I find that doesn't work when you ask them for money. I find the best technique so far is you tell them what you have and you sell them a product. So if they like the product you're selling, they may like everything else you're doing. So you're kind of like a salesperson, but you're focusing on not the big picture, but just one item at a time. If you would buy a water leak system for your house and where you need one, you might be interested in giving me $350 or $350,000. So far, that's been the best technique.
Just for clarity, maybe I explain that badly. I'm just talking about how, because to Nick's question, how do you present yourself? And the question, what you really want is,
yeah, I mean,
yes,
I mean, you start out all excited, and of course, you think you have the best product company in the world, and you're going to be a billionaire, and you're going to make them a billionaire. But then I found the best thing is just kind of talk to them, but act like you don't care if they invest or not. Just
So
say,
the only thing I would change on that is the acting part. I would just say, like, if you could just go into a situation peer to peer, do you want to work with these people? So you don't make that decision before you go in, but in every moment that happens. And so, like, there's interactions, there's reactions. And so if the excitement or the kind of the need for money, or the need, like you say, to just get the 350 or the 350K, like if that presents itself when we're close, it can be easy to just actually, like, they ask for something in the contract that you really don't want, but then you're saying yes to it. So that's the thing that I'm talking about here.
can't be too anxious because they think you are acting,
Hmm.
not being yourself. That's the way I've found, you know.
I agree that you can't be too anxious. My a lot of the coaching that we work on is never about faking it. You got to get yourself to a place where you are not anxious, not show that you're not anxious. Because every time that we're showing something, we're not fully connected, and that lack of connection to ourselves is going to break the connection with the other person as well. And to really build that trust and get that long-term buy-in, we need connection. And I'll be honest, I use the word connection a lot in my work, and lots of people don't understand it fully, which is why we kind of break it down in lots of different ways and different tools. Glenn, I saw your hand. And
Yeah,
Laura.
like Mark, there should be a certain level of arrogance that you go into with every meeting. Number one, nobody knows your business more than you do. Nobody knows the potential of your business more than you do, right? And I think there should be some selectivity, because again, you're grabbing money that's the financial investor, which I'm not a fan of. You're going to have to live with that individual for quite a time until their return is paid back or something. So there's some selectivity that you got to really think about. It's got to be more than money. It's got to be, can I coexist with this person sitting in my board meetings, right? Is this person actually going to lift a finger to kind of help me get there, right? So there's a lot of elements that create selectivity around who you want to let into the back room.
And you're correct there too. You become picky. Well, and actually I've refunded $60,000 for one investor because he just wanted to go a different direction. You know, he wanted, I wanted battery operated devices. He said, no. I said, well, if you're not happy, I can give you back your 60,000. He said, okay. And I did. So problem solved, you know.
Well, that particular
there's-
problem is solved, but then you need the 60K. But
In
that's
the
good.
chat,
That's
Laura
exactly
has
what I'm
added a
talking about.
question as well to address
I
before
see
Mike.
that. Sorry, yes, Lisa, thank you. Laura, I saw you come on camera as well. So what's the best way to overcome someone else's social bias driven credibility bias? For example, how can this person be doing that? That's an amazing question. In terms of overcoming somebody's bias, the short answer is we can't change somebody's bias. But if we can provide all of the things in the trust equation, we start to dent it. We start to build this relationship of, it's not about this person, which I really like what you've written there. It's not about this person. It's taking them away from the bias and actually saying, hey, all right, less about this person, but this is Laura, and this is what she's doing. And it goes back to the cultural things I was talking about before. I get lots of I was going to name different people from different cultures, different backgrounds, saying, hey, listen, I walk on stage or I walk into the room and already the biases are going wild. To this person couldn't have done this. They couldn't have got to this point. So one of the things I want to take you through before we finish is the power of storytelling. And I laugh there because there's always somebody in every room where I talk about that and they cringe because they're like, oh God, storytelling. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not an actor. I'm not a performer. I'm not a writer. And it's not about that. If you can hone and nail storytelling, not just in a pitch, but in any moment of your life, it's a way for us to take people away from their bias, to address that bias, because we're proving out, like, listen, whatever you think that group of people do, look over here this is what I'm doing and this is what we have done too. And I think if you use storytelling in a really powerful way, it's not just showing up and saying, here's our traction numbers. What do you think? It's actually taking us through that emotional side of things so they get emotionally involved. And then, like Mark, in the situation that you just described, like there was an emotional thing there. And that's great. Like to actually get a level of emotional response and connection from somebody that we're working with, whether that goes one way or the other, that's something that I think we should be striving for if you're going to spend years working with somebody. Laura, does that answer your question, albeit not as clearly as maybe you'd hoped?
Well, I wasn't expecting, I was hoping, maybe that you'd have the definitive answer, but no, I'm kidding. It's a very difficult problem. I think the equation helps me understand maybe even just how to, being a math person, how to analyze whether I'm losing credibility or losing traction there. I think there's something to that. But is it a winnable equation in certain settings? And I'm a software engineering manager, so you can guess where that question comes from. Now a CEO, but so this is really, really interesting. I do think that frames it very well. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, just before it's done it. My camera for some reason was just going really blurry. It's figured itself out. Again, I know I say this from a point of privilege, but I think that if people have a strong bias and you bring the credibility, you bring the reliability, you even put your cards on the table, you show the intimacy, and you understand where they're coming from, and you still can't get them past that bias, that's a huge red flag for you as a business owner and also just as a person. And then we don't probably want to work with those people. So I wanted to tag that on to what you were saying. So thank you for your question, Laura. Mark, that's for Laura.
Don't be discouraged. There's probably only 5 people in a room out of 100 that would be in sync with you anyway. So you got to learn to go, okay, not you, okay. And then you get a conversation with somebody and they're interested in what you have and your personality, and it's a match. So it's I mean, I've met investors with $40 million. They could flip a nickel, or wouldn't even feel it, but they're just into something else. They want to do in SaaS or tech, computers or environmental, something else than what you have. So it's a strange world of investors. And I know with Mike, Lisa, you can testify to that. And what is the secret? There's no one secret, but what
one of the biggest mistakes that I see made by startups is putting investors in this different ballpark. They're human beings, like, and they genuinely are. Like, of course, there are weird and wonderful investors. There are weird and wonderful lawyers. Doesn't mean every single lawyer is, and that's just to choose another group of people because Lisa's here. I think that making those assumptions and trying to categorize, we're just doing the same thing that Laura's already just talked to us about. We're creating our own bias about a group of. There are so many investors in the world. There is no way that they are all the same. Like you just said, Mark, you're never going to get on with you're only going to get on with 5 out of 100 people. If that's 100 investors, that's 100 investors who are not the same. And so there are 3 slides I want to take you through, and I'm very aware of time. And so the next thing I want to talk to you about, related to what you were saying, Mark, is I think one of the dangers is if we go looking for the people based on assumptions or even the research we've done, it can mean that we fall short sometimes. And there are very simple things that we know as humans that 5-year-olds are amazing at. 2-year-olds are really good at it. Before I show this slide, Amy just messaged something. Oh, that's for Laura. Great, I'll leave that one for Laura. So this is questioning types. how to ask questions. I'll run through this and then we'll talk about it some more. Probing questions on the left-hand side. Tell me, explain to me, describe to me. On the right-hand side, open questions. This is what every 2-3-year-old is doing. Why? When are we going to the candy store? So who, why, when, what, where, and how. It's so simple to put these on a slide. And I'm sure there's at least one person on this call who feels condescended or patronized that I've even shown this slide. I could honestly say it's more than 80% of my clients that can't use these when faced with a critical conversation, a crucial conversation, a moment where you need the money or you need the, because our receptors are going wild. We're trying to understand who this person is, what they want, what their deal flow is, how do they align with us. We're just trying to answer their questions and sound credible, reliable, show intimacy. We're trying to do all these things and we've got 30 minutes, right? 30, 45 minutes. And then we fall back on habits that we build as adults, where we change things up. We lose that kind of purity. Now, some people, don't get me wrong, there's probably statistically one person on this call who's really good at these too. And if you come and do any training, any coaching with Forefront Coaching, we delve into a lot of this stuff, obviously, a lot more deeply, and we give the opportunities to play and to practice these things. And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, it's hard for people, me included. And these also fall into cultural differences too. So being British, Brits on the whole hate the probing questions. Feels very rude to just say, tell me, explain to me, describe to me. Lots of other cultures, some examples I can give you, Latvians, Estonians, feel very, very comfortable, usually, in that side. So we find our different ways. There's 9 different options here. We find our ways to use these. But to go back to what you were saying, Mark, about figuring out who we're after, when we get these opportunities, if we ask questions in this way, you'll get so much more information.
Yeah, I think the other thing I've learned along the way is you approach everybody. And again, the emotional attachment is first. You know, you can lay out all the figures, all the dollars, how you're going to do it, what you have. But if you don't have an emotional connection, it just goes over everybody's head. I've seen so many pitches where, you know, here's the pitch deck, here's A slide, B slide, C slide, and it's like you just zone them out. But people remember you if you can get some kind of emotional attachment. So I go in with everybody and I say, okay, I'm going to do 2 things, educate and entertain, with maybe more emphasis on entertainment, because then they remember you. And I don't just talk about, you know, the circus or the latest thing in the news, but how your product is is relevant for today's world. And they listen to the stories, you know, so.
Right. And so storytelling is the thing I'm going to finish this session with. But this is how to understand more information from them. And so, Mark, what you just described brilliantly is, you know, storytelling, but we don't know if they're listening. Silence or head nods does not necessarily mean that they're listening. And so we've got to stop and just ask questions. I said to Lisa before you all joined, like I struggle with webinars over coaching sessions, because I'd rather we had 5 hours with each other and I could actually ask you questions in this way and learn more about it. But it depends on the time that you have with the investor or with the customer or whatever. But if you ask these questions, you'll leave the session or the call knowing a lot more. Now, we need to understand, when do we ask questions of them and when do we just answer their questions? And this active listening, I'm just going to go back for a moment so you're not distracted. This slide I'm going to show you now is based off negotiation techniques. Anyone who's interested in further reading or listening, Chris Voss, VOSS, was an FBI negotiator, now in corporate. There's loads of amazing podcasts, books, audiobooks from him. And this next slide is kind of a very, very basic summary of some of the things that we need. So I'm going to fly through it.
Mike.
Yes.
Question.
Sorry, my audio is going in and out, so I missed the first part of that last slide. But were you suggesting that we lean on the probing questions or the open questions with the investors?
I'm so sorry, something happened to your mic as you asked the key part of the question. Can you ask it again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I was asking on that last slide, are you suggesting that we lean on the probing questions or the open questions with investors or
Oh,
both?
both, absolutely both. Thank you for the clarification there. So trying to avoid the closed questions. So for instance, this is a very basic one, but are you interested in investing? The options are yes or no. So as a kid, you're going to just say yes or no. As adults, most people are not going to be that direct and that rude, and you're going to get sidestep. You're going to get like oh, I need to talk to everybody. I need to talk to the directors.
I'll get it.
And you're going to get some sort of sidestep. If you ask a question such as, what would you need to see from us to be at a point where you're ready to invest? They've at least got to think about it. Now maybe they haven't thought about it, but now you're getting the cogs turning. And so asking questions in the open way or the TED way will solicit a lot more information. And because we haven't got time to practice this today, which is something I would love to do with you all, my biggest encouragement, if you don't believe me, is just this evening, try it with someone you live with or someone that you're going to see in the next couple of days who's not in business. Just try the difference between the closed questions and the open questions. If you've never done this before, and I promise you'll see the difference. And so that's the kind of tryout if you don't believe me. But this has been proven a lot. We've seen it a lot in a lot of the theory originally came out of battle zones. It came out of war zones where you got two people from different cultures, different languages, trying to communicate in one language, and how much miscommunication there was, and frankly, how many people died because of the miscommunication. And so there was so much study put into it from militaries around the world. And that's kind of the summary of on that slide that I just gave you there. They're the powerful ways to solicit information from somebody. It looks really simple, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, yep, thanks. That's perfect.
Yeah, no worries. So again, this is going to look really simple. We're going to go 12 o'clock round. Active listening, hear the content, observe body language, natural technique, paraphrasing, summarizing, clarifying, questioning, and self-awareness. So real sort of simple kind of delve into these. Hear the content. Sounds obvious. I've met a lot of investors who ask questions and somebody talks for 2 minutes, 3 minutes and doesn't answer their question and they just move on. They just can't be bothered. I couldn't even give you a stat on that one. I haven't quantified it. It's really high. And so the other things, like, we need to start to understand how we can improve hearing that actual content, which come a little bit later in the circle here. So body language, there's a study that still underpins a lot of what we understand about communication foundations that proved out that in all communication, 55% of it comes down to body language. So when I'm trying to share slides and I'm leaning in and I'm leaning out, I prefer to be sat down. When I'm meeting you all for the first time, I'm showing standing up, because you get a lot more of who I am and the way I move and the energy that I have, because you learn a lot more about me quickly, because you're getting more of that 55%. And so we can observe that in others if we've got people who are kind of looking away or looking down, or kind of, you know, we see the hand movement as well as the look down, someone's texting. It's okay. We don't need to let the amygdala kick in, but instead use those questions from before to re-engage them. That's my biggest advice here. So natural technique goes back to, I think it was Nick's question earlier on, like, how do we, how are we in those situations when we don't know those people? We talked about that a lot already, so I won't talk about it anymore, but being yourself. Paraphrasing, summarizing, clarifying seem like synonyms for the same word, but they're not. They are all techniques to do a similar thing. A lot of people won't be asking questions in these very simple and yet effective ways. You'll get compound questions, 3 questions in one. And I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. So putting it into your own words, paraphrasing, summarizing, just think, okay, so just for clarity, you want to know about our sort of customer retention, our CAC, and just our overall monthly revenue. Yes, cool. So then you can go into it. Their original question was 2 minutes long. You summarized it and clarifying, saying, okay, so you're looking to understand more about our CAC. Is that right? Great. Questioning, we've been over on the previous slide. The thing here about questioning is using those questions to re-engage. And so even when we've only got 30 minutes, please make sure it's a conversation. The title of this whole session is how to get people to care. And everybody cares about themselves the most, even mothers. There's a couple of studies actually that prove mothers are the only people on the planet that care about someone more than themselves, like scientifically and biologically. But then there's also disproof to some of those theories. It's that thing on a plane where they say, put your own mask on before putting your child's mask on. They had to do that because it was proven, because of some of these studies, that there are loads of mothers that would obviously do it the other way around. Sorry, men, fathers in the group, it's science. I was offended by it when I first found out as well. But we do care about ourselves first of all. And so when you ask people questions about themselves and about their interests, you're going to get a lot more engagement. And so the last thing on the list here is self-awareness. My self-awareness that I'm going to run 5 minutes over, and anybody who needs to leave, please do, because I want to share this storytelling device with you. I've loved all of the questions, and but having self-awareness in those moments, are you actually answering the question? If they've asked you a question, you start answering it and you think you're answering it, but they're going, oh, maybe, okay, they're not as engaged as they were on the previous couple. So we're using that observing body language and we're connecting that back to our self-awareness. So these are all very simple techniques to build on those negotiation skills. And as promised, one of the most successful ways to get that emotional connection is through storytelling. If you Google it, there are 7 different ways to tell a story. That's it. So I'm going to give you one of them. Every story that you've ever seen or engaged with can be boiled down into one of these 7. I'm going to give you one of these before we finish up. I've gone the wrong way on my slides. So it was right there. The hero's journey. Can I just get a show of hands and emoji hands if you've heard of the hero's journey before? Cool. If you Google it, there are a couple of different versions of this. There's a 12-point version, there's a 21-point version. And what I've created for you here is a really simple way to tell a story in under 60 seconds that will not only talk about the problem you're solving and what you do and how you do it, it will also drive the why now. It might even build in the why us. So I'll talk you through it and I'm going to give you an example. Set the scene. If you don't get these as I go through, I will take you through it in a moment. What's the main challenge? The pit can be a number of things, which I will show you. This is essentially, we're trying to expand this problem from the micro to the macro. That's the most simple way I can explain that to you. We're looking to see scale. The wise mentor is you, or your product or your service that solves it. And resolution is where we sort of come back around to the beginning, but now with the new golden chalice. So if I'm talking to you about one of my customers and what's happened since they've worked with us, the resolution is the impact that has been seen. So I'm going to give you 2 real quick versions of this. A B2, which way round will I do it? I'll do a B2C first, and then I'll do a B2B. And then I'll take any questions as people start to peel off. if you do need to go now, please do. Lisa's going to have the recording. In 2019, my son Alejandro, he came home from school and he'd been playing football, and he's sitting on a bar stool in our kitchen, and we're talking, and he just slid right off. And we laughed a bit, and he got back on, and we're talking, and it happened again. And Alejandro is 8, he's my eldest, and I'll be honest, this is weird. I start to freak out a little bit, and I'm wondering, what do I do? Do I rush into the emergency room, or am I being a dramatic parent? It turns out that Alejandro had concussion. Well, it's not just kids playing football who are at risk of that. In the US, there are 8.5 million sports players who've been proven to be at a higher risk of concussion on a daily basis. Not to mention all the armed forces members and the number of patients who go into the ER and are sent home without being diagnosed. Now, I don't know if you all know, but the chances of getting a second concussion within days afterwards raised by 40%. And continual concussion causes brain damage. So what we do is we put a handheld device into the hands of the doctors, the armed forces members, and the parents. And it allows you to assess whether someone has concussion within a minute. So doctors can better take care of their patients, so that armed forces members can better take care of their colleagues, and parents like me can figure things out with their kid without rushing them to the ER room and without freaking out. Now, that one's particularly like dramatic, if you will. There are more like business-like ones. But what we do is we set the scene where and what was happening, the challenge, what was the major thing that was experienced. The pit is the numbers in this case, the numbers, the stats that grow it. I'm going to show you other things that could go in the pit. The Wise Mentor, the very simple solution. Now, you may or may not have noticed, my description of my product was quite short, because actually I'm showing you it and it ticks off the problems that we just experienced. So what we're doing is we're not only drawing out the emotion of myself and then the many people that are affected by this, but actually we're also building in the why now. So there's the why now, and there's the emotional connection for this person and for all of these people. So I'll do a B2B version for you. Who's bored of
Quick
Zoom?
B2B version, Mike. Quick B2B
Because we've got to
version.
finish up.
We're running out of time.
Do you know what? I won't do it then. In that case, what I'm going to tell you is one of the other options in the pit is that we briefly talk about the competition. So we talk about the existing options in the world. So when we talk about, so this is the scene, this is the major challenge that is experienced. And it turns out 60% of people across the US experience this problem, and their existing options are, and then you talk us through why it's flawed. Company I'm working with at the moment, they're based in Nigeria. They're helping people. It turns out 60% of people in Nigeria have to use a gasoline generator to get power to their homes, but that's been proven to cause asthma. And the existing solutions available are to put solar panels or wind farms in their garden, which cost so much money that none of them can afford in the first place. And so what we do is we provide, and then you talk about, so what you're doing is just, we don't need to go into a detailed analysis of your competition, but we're building in the why now, because people are literally dying from chronic asthma and there is no solution. But if you say there's no solution without proving it out or showing that evidence,
Right.
you lose that credibility. Thank you for stopping me, Lisa. I could have been here
Oh my
for
God, Mike, I mean,
minutes
you
and
said
5
before we want 5 hours. So final question from Amy. We need 5 hours. Final question from Amy as we wrap up. You know, this is going back to what she does and focusing on female founders, and statistics and studies have shown that women will get prevention questions from investors and men will get promotion questions. So anything to respond to this typical question as we wrap up?
Amy, would you just give me a little bit more with regards to the prevention questions or the promotion questions? What's your question for me, I guess?
How do you deal with them? How do you address them?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about it as we were going through the probing questions versus open questions
Yeah.
slide. And one of the conversations like Lisa is talking about is for women, we receive questions about like, you know, that are kind of negative or sometimes derogatory, like, well, you know, when are you going to hire that person to get the next role versus like, what can we do to support you hiring the person to get the next role? You know, and so having just the probing answers or the open question answers sometimes doesn't feel sufficient to kind of take their questions, flip it back around, and answer it in a positive way.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about the amygdala. In those moments, you feel attacked. You know that there is a load of bias that's coming behind that question. So in those moments, we've got credibility and showing. So what we're doing, to use that example that you just gave, so what we're doing to find those hires is that we've actually put this out, and looking at what we're raising, there's 40% of this which is going towards finding the best talent within Canada as we expand over there. I know that you've worked a lot with startups in Canada. What's your experience of the best ways to hire? Get them involved in the conversation in the shortest and fastest way possible, so that it becomes a peer-to-peer rather than my camera today. My gosh, sorry guys. So it doesn't become an interrogation. It doesn't become, it's so easy for these things to turn into, I'm just going to give up on the camera. It's so easy to have somebody bring their bias and just fire those questions at you. If you treat them as a peer, just meet them where they are, answer the question, and then take that opportunity to take that back to them with a question. If you've done your research before, one of my parting things for you is, I think you should go into every meeting with an investor with a list of questions that you want answered. I would say in a 30-minute meeting, you're looking at like 3 to 5 questions, but instead of waiting till the end and firing them all out before the time runs out, fit them in and relate them to what's being said. The main reason for that is it takes away a little bit of this us and them. It's not a full solution to the prevention versus promotion. That's bias that we're going to have to try and kick out for the next couple of generations. But the small steps in the meantime is show up and prove that you're doing the good thing. Also admit when you don't know, and when you haven't got that, but bring the positive version of the truth and keep being reliable and credible, and then keep that conversation. So not to sound like that broken record, but the trust equation really will bring a lot of that foundation if you can hit all of those 4 points.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank
Great
you.
question. Mike, really, like, I feel like we could stay on for forever. There's so much here to unravel, but you have given everybody in a short period of time such incredible wisdom and jewels to take home and really think about how everybody's going to present themselves, both for investors and customers and in life, as we noticed earlier. So thank you so much for being here. Thank everybody for joining us. We will circulate the deck and the recording, and we really are grateful for everybody's time. Sign up for next alert to stay up to date. Follow us on LinkedIn, and we will see you next time around. Mike, thank you so much again.
Welcome. Thanks, everybody. Great to meet you all.
Bye-bye.